Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming to the PTGAC meeting this evening. Unfortunately, Claudia, our chair, is not feeling well this evening, so I'm going to be taking the role of chair at the meeting. I'm Ben Hart. I'm vice chair of the committee, to anyone who doesn't know. And we've got a lot to talk about, so we're going to dive right into the agenda. Everyone had a chance to take a look at it, I hope. And Steph, you sent around a couple of late items to the agenda. That's correct?
Yes, and those will be added to section 4.1.
So everyone's had a chance to take a look at it. Can I get someone to move that we approve the agenda for the meeting? Nicola. Okay, and a seconder. Any comments or questions about this? No, we're all good. Okay. Well, what do we do here, Steph?
All in favor?
All in favor. That's great. And all in favor of going forward with the agenda. Awesome. Looks good. Got a good eye on it. Cool. All right, let's do that. Next up is the adoption of the minutes from the February 28th meeting of the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Advisory Committee. I hope everyone had a chance to take a look at that. Can I get someone to move that we adopt those minutes? Jeremy, great. And a seconder. I saw DG put her hand up first. Any comments or questions about the minutes? All in favor of adopting them? Okay, awesome. Well, let's carry on then. So public comments. Do we have any members of the public here?
Did I see someone named Jason come in? Emiko?
Yes. So I do want to make a very brief presentation, but I'm wondering whether it'd be more appropriate to talk about that when our agenda item comes up. It might be easier for people to discuss it at that time. Would that be all right?
That works.
She's with 5.1.
With 5.1, okay.
Thank you. Okay, perfect.
Okay. Anyone else? No, okay, well, let's move forward then. The big one. All right, so first big sort of media item on the agenda is the council referral. It's the Metro Vancouver rezoning application and OCP amendment for the Cape Roger Curtis campground. We have Daniel with us this evening, so I'm going to pass it over to him and he's going to present to us on this topic.
Thank you, Ben. Can everyone see that okay? All right, great.
Yes,
so I have
perfect.
just a short presentation I'll go over to sort of guide and lead us into a discussion on this. So as people are probably aware, the municipality has received a application to amend the land use bylaw and official community plan from Metro Vancouver to create a proposed new regional park at Cape Roger Curtis. So this is just an overview of it showing the proposed park. So Metro Vancouver has an option to purchase 24 of the 10-acre lots at Cape Roger Curtis. So part of the south coastline and then part of the interior lots as well. So the rezoning application specifically is to rezone the property or the properties to a park zone with a zone, so passive park zone with a zone variation C over a portion of the site to permit supervised overnight use of up to 100 campsites. And the proposal includes a range of campsites, so walk, bike, and tent camping, group tent camping, car accessible tent camping, and tent cabins. And then on the right side of the screen is the proposed site plan at this point showing the different locations of those campsites. In terms of just the overall zoning and OCP, so currently in our official community plan, the lands at Cape Roger Curtis are designated as R rural. And so this application would amend those to be a regional park designation. And the zoning, the lands are zoned rural residential 1, which is a sort of our most common rural zoning. And that zone permits individual lots to have one dwelling and up to one accessory dwelling unit per lot. So the 24 lots could be developed as up to 48 total dwellings. And then in terms of current overnight accommodation uses permitted on the zone does permit what we call residential guest accommodation, which is sort of short-term rental use as an accessory use of the permitted dwellings. So overnight use for up to 120 days a year. And it permits bed and breakfast use as well. So permits up to 5 bed and breakfast rooms as part of a home occupation. And then finally, our land use bylaw has this section that is uses permitted in all zones. So our land use bylaw permits in any zone bicycle paths, equestrian trails, pedestrian trails, boardwalks, educational, interpretive signage, open space, and natural parks. So as this committee probably knows, there's several parks on Bowen that operate under this exemption. So right adjacent to this proposed park is the lands purchased by the Bowen Island Conservancy, where they have their Wild Coast Nature Reserve. And those are on lands that are still zoned that rural residential 1 zoning. And their trails and their nature work and their interpretive signage all fit under the existing zone, so they haven't needed to rezone. So that portion of Metro Vancouver's application could continue under the current zoning, but what specifically needs the zoning change and why they've submitted the application is the change to allow the overnight camping. In terms of process timeline, I know this is will be small on your screen depending on the size of the screen, but essentially we introduced this application to council at the February 27th council meeting. Council at that time referred this application to a number of committees, to the Islands Trust, to First Nations, to agencies like BC Ferries and Vancouver Coastal Health. So we've been doing a round of engagement with the committees at this time before we will be returning to council, and it's scheduled to come at April 11th, so this coming Tuesday, for that next council discussion to look at the results of these initial consultation. And then, as the proposal advances, it would need council meeting consideration of a first reading of amendment bylaws, and then that bylaw gets referred out again. So similar process you'll see later tonight with the Arbutus Bay Road rezoning. And then any amendment bylaw would need to be considered for second reading, referred to a public hearing, consideration of third reading, and then adoption. So still sort of at the start of this rezoning process. And this is just that motion from council's February 27th meeting. So you can see referred to, I think the count here is 9 advisory committees and a number of other agencies and public information meetings. So in March, Metro Vancouver held a series of open houses at BIX. Hopefully people were able to attend or at least find the information on it there. And then the other thing that we received from Metro last week and so sent around to the committees is just some additional reports that the committee may want to discuss. So the first one being submitting a summary of approaches to implementation, visitation, operations, and access. So I've just pulled some of the images from that report here. So this is just looking at their process, the rounds of engagement they're proposing as part of park rezoning, and the arrow at the bottom of their diagram just showing the rezoning OCP amendment process continuing through that timeline. One of the other things in that report then was proposed phasing summary of the park. So the concept being that the park wouldn't be developed all at once, but would be phased in. So the overnight camping, for example, happening in 3 phases so that it wouldn't open at the 100 campsite number, but would be phased in over time, as would some of the land management restoration work. And then that report also estimated visits to the park, so trying to estimate annual day visits and annual overnight visits, so a total estimated annual visits, the daily use in December and in July. And that report provides some details in terms of how many visitations occur in Crippen, and then sort of trying to estimate what the uptake would be at a regional park at Crippen, or sorry, at Cape Roger Curtis as well. And then the other report I thought would be of interest to the Parks Committee is this ecological background report. So it provided an ecological overview of the site and of the proposed park. So it's based on existing inventories that probably some people on this committee are quite familiar with, and then as well as updated terrestrial ecosystem mapping that was conducted by Metro Vancouver in 2022. And that report did things like it identified ecological communities at risk and species at risk in the park area and provided operational guidelines for the park. And then it's just my spiel to say, council's referred this application to a number of advisory committees seeking recommendations. And as we've been doing these rounds with the committees, the recommendation can take different forms depending on what the committee is comfortable with or what form they want to take. So some committees have provided council with general comments or guiding principles for rezoning. Committees may want to make a recommendation on the application itself, or they may want to make recommendations on what additional information is needed for the committee to be in a position to make a recommendation for council. So just things to keep in mind. And then just the recommendation that's in the agenda, and this still says Housing Advisory Committee, but obviously the Parks, Trails, Greenways Advisory Committee, and then comments you provide. So thanks, Ben. I'll hand it back to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Daniel. Really appreciate it. So what we're looking for is to work towards some kind of recommendation to be made by this committee. Obviously, we probably have some things to say about how that will go. And it looks like Sue Ellen would like to start the conversation. Go ahead, Sue Ellen.
I don't actually. I just want to introduce Jeff Fitzpatrick, who's with us in the meeting, and he's the manager of Metro Vancouver Parks, New Parks Acquisitions and Design. You can correct me there, Jeff, but I just wanted to acknowledge to everybody he's here, and we can probably help us answer some questions.
Excellent.
Thank you, Councillor Fast, and thank you everyone for having me here tonight. I am battling a bit of a bug, so bear with me if I'm coughing a bit, but yeah, very happy to be here. And as Councillor Fast said, my name is Jeff Fitzpatrick. I'm the manager of Regional Park Design and Development, and happy to support the discussion, answer any questions that come up. And I'll take my cues from the committee, but thank you for having me here.
Great. Thanks for being here, Jeff. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, would anyone like to get the ball rolling on a discussion about this, hopefully with an eye towards putting together a recommendation for this committee? Jeremy.
Yeah, I get, having read what we've been presented thus far, I get the sense, and I'm very familiar with that property over the many years. I do get the sense that it's a very small park area in relation to the proposed level of use. And I find that ultimately that could be very contradictory to the intended purpose of the park. And also, obviously, I think there are certain parts of the particularly the South Shore area that is very, very sensitive, and I think to which most people would gravitate towards. So in terms of the preservation mandate, that's an area of very particular sensitivity. And I think that it all kind of feeds together in my sense that the actual area of the park is quite small in relation to the ultimate numbers that are proposed to use it. I don't know if anybody else feels the same, but I think the issue of scale is of huge importance in terms of the objectives, but also in terms of the preservation of the site.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, thanks. Just following up on that a little bit, looking at that visitation projections, assuming it gets built out as planned to the maximum number of campsites and occupancy, in the summer they're projecting 95% occupancy of 480 possible visitors. So that's quite a large number of individuals camping every weekend, basically, because it's the weekends that get hit with that 95%. So, the Fridays and the Sundays or Mondays could be quite interesting for traffic, for the shuttles that might be running, for the accessible campsites, that kind of thing. So that number of individuals on 240 acres just sounds a little overwhelming. Just kind of looking at it from that perspective.
Back to you, Jeremy.
I would agree, and irrespective of, I mean, the campsites are one thing, but just think of the day visitors. I mean, that when you add that into the equation, and I'm sure there would be a lot of those. Yeah, again, it gets back to this issue of the size of the park in relation to proposed visitations. And it seems over the top to me offhand.
PG?
Yeah, thanks. And I see Jeffrey has raised his hand, and when I was reviewing the information, I found it a bit hard to decipher, or there wasn't a very clear, or maybe I missed it, in terms of combining the numbers of people at peak, during the different times of year total with your campers plus your day use. And perhaps Jeffrey could clarify that, and how those numbers were generated.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yes, no, happy to speak to that a little bit. Yeah, so the it's a bit of a art and a science in terms of projecting how many people will come to a park. And the way we do it is we look at our existing parks, of course, one being Crippen Regional Park on Bowen, and other similar parks across the region. We look at the kind of facilities we have, where it's located, access, and so on, size of the park, and that kind of thing, and we work backwards from there. In terms of the day use visitation, what we would predict for a park like this would be somewhere in the range of about 115 people per day in low season in the winter, and about somewhere between 230 and 285 visitors per day in the high season, in the summer season. Now that would be sort of that fully completed, ultimate build-out park 7 or 8 years from now. They would move. It would of course be incremental as the park is facilities are provided and access is provided. So that kind of gives you an idea of the volume of people accessing the park from a day use perspective, and you can kind of think about hours in a day and work backwards from that. So because of that this park is further afield, that much of it will be conservation focused, that the projections are they're quite low, based on they're lower than other parks in the system, just because of the nature of the park. What we do know is that some other things we know from use at Crippen Park is that about half of those visitors will be on island, and half of the visitors excuse me, and half of the visitors will be off island. So that's an important thing for us to consider, just in terms of how we plan the park and how it's connected to the community and how it's connected to access and other ways of getting to the park. We know that in terms of how people use parks, this is true for all regional parks, but kind of especially true for Bowen Island because of the barriers of the ferry, is that local people live close to the parks benefit disproportionately in a way because they access it for the quick dog walks, the walk with the family, the sunsets, those kind of things, that's sort of integrated into their life, versus people who come for longer visits. So it's just something for us to consider as in terms of how we plan the access and that kind of thing for the park. In terms of how we're proposing to provide access to the park, the idea with this park is to provide access by way of a park shuttle and improve trail connections, working with Bowen Island Municipality to really limit car access to the park as well. And that would be the case both for overnight use and day use as well. So hopefully that provides a bit of context. In terms of numbers of overnight visitors, there's people do do work in projecting how many people use campgrounds, and based on number of people per site and when they'll be booked and so on. A fully built out campground or camping sites would have somewhere in the range of 1,500 visitors over the month of July, 1,600 over the month of August. So it gives you a bit of context of what that would look like over an entire month.
Thanks, Jeff.
And could I just follow up? So Jeff,
Of course, yeah.
how does that relate in terms of, I mean, I hear this in the high season, 230 to 280 visitors. Just based on my experience at Crippen Park, that seems incredibly low. So how does that compare to the numbers that we have? I mean, I thought I read, and I'm sorry, I'm over awash in documents here trying to find the number, but I thought it was somewhere over like 340,000 per annum at Crippen Park. So that seems like completely out of context to what the numbers you're projecting here.
No, I understand that. It's because of the different context of the park. So Crippen Regional Park, I'm sure I don't have to explain to this group, but it is knitted right into the fabric of Snug Cove. So people literally commute through Crippen Regional Park daily. Commuters use the trails on the park. It's extremely high use, and it's every time people move in and out of the park, that's a visit to the park. So it has an urban context that this park wouldn't have. So that's why the visitation is significantly less. It's also a larger park, and it's also so that urban context and the size of the park. But if we look to other parks like Minnetonka, so more trail focused parks, they provide good comparisons as well. So that's some of the rationale in terms of the projections. But ultimately, the visitation is driven by the accessibility of the park, what's in the park, and the ways for people to access it.
Thank you.
So Ellen.
Excuse me.
Thank you. And thanks, Jeff. I didn't want to comment too much on all the reports and things, because of course I'm on council and I've got a voice there, and I'm here to listen and to liaise. And so as council liaison, I'd just like to put a few questions to this committee, Parks, Trails, and Greenways Connectivity kind of committee. Number one, I think council might be interested in the fact of whether you support a park, because I think park staff are hearing a lot of these in-depth questions, and people have been asking the in-depth for the information. Of course, we all care. We're passionate. We're one of these super participatory communities where we have the highest voter turnout usually in local elections and that kind of thing, because people are passionate about this place, and we know it well because of the scale and because we're involved in all kinds of groups like this. So I won't go on about that, but does this committee support a park? Might be something council would want to know, depending on what you think. What's the alternative? As Daniel said at the outset, 24 private lots, not many limits on how much clearing, or there's a few conservation covenants, but they're not monitored, in my opinion. And if anybody can correct me if I'm wrong about that. And 5 bed and breakfast rooms per house if somebody wanted to set that up, or and short-term vacation rentals on top of that. So that those kind of visitors could add up as well. And we know that's happening other places on Bowen, where we've got at least 287 short-term vacation rental properties advertised, as far as I remember from the last report. That's just one example. So that's my second question. Do we want to park? What's the alternative? So thinking the comparison. Third, I'd like to, and I'll be brief here, I just want to introduce what's special about Crippen Park now. I think what's special about people coming to Bowen to experience the regional park here now is that it can be a car-free visit. It can be faster because you don't have to wait with your car in a ferry lineup. You're not going to miss a ferry, walk on, or bicycle on, or whatever. Secondly, it's more affordable because you can come on the transit, or you can find parking somewhere, come on the bus the last little bit, whatever, but you don't have to pay the $40 to take your car on the ferry. And third, it is an island of walks. It's scaled for moving across it. My neighbors, Marion and Jean, used to walk across the island to Cape Roger Curtis for a picnic from over here at Collins Farm, and then walk back again. You know, it's a day use kind of special park, in my opinion, and this is over many years of working in parks and working as a consultant also on visitor experience in parks. And anyway, that sense of freedom that you get from walking up to the top of the ferry, that's part of the whole trip. And in a car, that's way more limited. And I don't, anyway, I'll stop there. I just want to say, what about the future? Metro Vancouver has just adopted a, I don't have it right here, their new Metro 2050 plan, which includes bike routes throughout the city, ways to get around on transit that reduce greenhouse gas emissions because this is the decade of climate action. And so I just wanted to think about what could Bowen look like? We know what it's like now. It's very car centric. It's hard for any of us to get our minds out of this, but electric bikes are a game changer. What if there was a multi-use path that went all the way across the island, as we've on Bowen have been planning for all these years, as we've been also had in our OCP a large park on that side of the island. And what could that be like as an exemplary experience, attractive, affordable experience for people living in a more dense urban Metro Vancouver? So I just want to put a few ideas out there and take my hand down and listen, unless Jeff wants to respond to any of that, if I've got something wrong, or Danielle. Otherwise, I'm finished.
So much, Sue. Jeremy, I saw your hand go up earlier, so you want to jump in?
Yeah, it was a question for Jeffrey. It was in regards to the phasing in of the elements of the park, and whether or not, presumably, well, the things I've read thus far suggest that that's as a kind of a sussing out of what's viable, and I wonder if that is in fact the case. I mean, if there will be a willingness to retract some of the initial intentions if it proves that they're not, for whatever reason, viable, be it in numbers or other problems that might arise in the course of exploring the process of a gradual expansion.
Yeah, I certainly can speak to that. I think the idea of a phased park development or plan or implementation is really about adaptive management, and it's a principle we use in all of our parks, in how we plan them, how we build them, how we manage them, and it's the ability to put a good plan in place and learn continually as we do it. So and a bit of a go slow principle. So in the case of the overnight access, you know, the initial phase might be a group camp and 10 bike-in sites and, whatever else, 5 drive-in sites. We'd have the park shuttle in place, and we'd have other park amenities, and we could study, is the park reservation system working? Is the shuttle working? Are there any unanticipated impacts that we need to adjust to? Do we need to look at timing? Are there unforeseen impacts? And then, to adjust and learn as we go. And we would do that for all aspects of the park, even the restoration, the environmental considerations, the education components, our work with First Nations on programming. It's a matter of kind of learning of what we're doing, making sure we're getting it right, making sure we're listening to feedback and making adjustments accordingly.
I just wonder if there are any, I guess what you would call sine qua nons, without which nothing or not in the park's approach. I mean, I realize that when you're shelling out that kind of money, there needs to be a justification for it, obviously, in terms of its use and its appeal. But that's kind of an important thing to know. I know when the national park issue came up here, that was a prevailing question that was never really answered, or maybe we just didn't get that far. I don't know. But are there kind of things that without which Metro Vancouver Parks would consider this not a viable proposition?
So could you say that again? I'm trying to get to the root of your question.
In the sense of, do they have sort of things which they absolutely have to realize in the concept of the park, in terms of numbers or campsites or not, or beyond which the park would not be considered viable?
Yeah, I guess there's a few. Let me try to tease out a few questions in what you just said, and it's a good question. In terms of the regional park system, we do have a dual mandate, and it's a conservation mandate and it's an access mandate. So we say we connect and protect. So we protect sensitive landscapes and provide opportunities for people to connect with them. What that actually means on the ground is most of the land is for conservation where people can't go because they're large parks. But that access to nature, to this land, is important in terms of every park needs a certain kilometer of trail or number of people. No, there's no requirements for that. It's based on the site. It's based on good planning, good science, and what the site can sustain. In terms of this park in particular, the overnight use is an important consideration. It was one of the purposes that the park was acquired, because it's further afield from the region. It's a significant investment. Visitation will be lower because it's further afield, and the unique characteristic of the land that it was cleared and serviced with roads and developed in areas that would allow for overnight sensitive, low impact overnight use without disturbing the natural landscape. It was one of the reasons it was purchased. So that's an important reason for this park to be purchased, and that is why we're moving through the rezoning process now to determine if indeed we can proceed with that use.
So that is kind of like not just the idea of camping, but the number of those are things that would not be really negotiable items in terms of.
Well, I mean, I think the use of camping is important, and the rezoning application is for up to 100 sites, and that was based on an analysis of the cleared and open space that was cleared for residential development, and using some of that, certainly not all of it, to support some overnight use. We are also in a planning process right now, park planning process, where we're looking at ecological data, public input. We're talking to First Nations. We're looking at what people want in the park. And the purpose of that planning process is to figure out, well, where where do the trails go? What do people want in this park? What kind of overnight use should it be, and where should that be, and what's the exact number? So that sort of details work is something we're doing right now, and we're working.
Lou, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Just thanks, Jeffrey, for coming to our meeting. I just have a couple of initial reactions just for now. One, in terms of just clarification around the adaptive management strategy, which is a great approach. I'm just wondering if this has been done, if there are examples of how this adaptive management has actually looked in practice in other sites that the Metrovan has been involved in, particularly with like something similar to this case, to Cape Roger Curtis, with the day use plus the camping. Has there been an approach where there's been maybe like a park opened up first and then camping introduced later? And if not, like, it would be interesting to see how this adaptive management actually works in practice, given, things often take time to get put into place. So I'm wondering how much flexibility there is with an institution like Metro Vancouver, and then also dealing with Bowen Island Municipality. And it seems like there are a lot of major stakeholders at play for that agility that kind of strategy has. And then there have been a lot of documents, so I'm not sure if I've read everything, but I just wanted to know if we're expecting more of a transportation assessment or study, because the one I saw talks a lot about how the two scenarios, whether the zoning stays as is with the 24 lots, or how that traffic would look like as opposed to having the park and camping. So I found there's a lot in there and maybe a little confusing. A lot of talk about, well, this is what will be built out if we keep it as 24 lots. But I think the history of Cape Roger Curtis has shown that I don't think it'll be built out all at once. And I don't know if we'll have that much. I mean, I think there's a lot of guessing, and I think presuming this will be like this without maybe some hardcore evidence. And I guess the numbers are a little bit vague to me, just in terms of how they work out. But I think maybe disentangling the transportation figures alone and access to the park from like the current zoning and the 24 lots would be helpful, if another detailed transportation study is coming out, just to really understand what that will look like. So that's just some initial thoughts for now. And I think, sorry, one more. I also found some of the language like maybe a little bit vague, like some vehicle access or limited day use vehicle access, which I think would need to be really teased out to have like concrete, this is how much parking we'll have, or to begin with, at least, like, so each phase it's clear. Because I think it's hard to make a decision based on just kind of the limited information that's on the table at the moment, at least from my point of view.
Yeah, those are great. Those are all sorts of great questions. Let me start with your question about adaptive management, which is a really good one. And believe it or not, we are a fairly large organization, but we're pretty nimble in terms of how we're able to manage our park system. And I guess just off the top of my head, a few examples of where we've adapted and changed approaches based on new information. And these are just off the top of my head. I can think of a popular trail in one of our parks that was used for many years. And what we learned through archaeology, through work with First Nations, was that, in fact, this trail moved through really sensitive land and an important territory for the nation, and was prohibiting traditional use of the land. So when we learned that, we closed the trail and we rerouted people through an entirely different section of the park. So it's a detailed example, but it's adapting to new information. A number of our park sites are experiencing the impacts of climate change, and we're having to change how people access and move through our sites pretty rapidly in cases where shorelines are eroding and we have to remove public access or provide access elsewhere or manage the land differently. Yeah, it's steps we take all the time. So yeah, changing, shifting, providing access to different areas, providing restoration in certain areas, we pivot pretty quickly on that. In terms of the traffic study, we had provided trip analysis to Bowen Island Municipality, and there's additional work coming to that. But because we're in a rezoning process with the municipality, that's why it compares the trips associated with what's currently approved and what is proposed to be approved. So the report is done by traffic engineers, and they use their standards to generate, well, based on the kind of development that's allowed, these trips will result from the current zoning. And based on what's being proposed, these trips will result from the park. Considering the modes of access to the park that we're proposing, which are trail focused and park shuttle focused. We, as you said, we do provide a range for some things. So we say some parking will need to be required for accessibility, for local use, maybe 30 to 50 sites. But some of those decisions will come later as we work through the planning process and figure out, well, exactly where are the trails going? How do people really want to use it? Exactly what does that access look like? So the level of detail does kind of move along with the pace of the planning process, but I recognize more and detailed information is always desirable as soon as possible. But thank you for those questions, Lou.
Bill, you're up next. Bill, you're on mute.
I see that. Thanks, Ben. And thanks, Jeffrey, for joining us. I guess I'd like, first of all, just to echo some of Jeremy's comments and the question to see if we can get a little bit more from you about thresholds, because I think that's going to be the question a lot of the community is going to have is there a minimum, are there thresholds that are in mind with respect to specifying the scale of the park when it comes to number of visitors and particularly day use visitors and number of campers that are needed to make it a viable operation. Because I think that the numbers are pretty astounding. When I looked through some of the documentation, particularly the transportation documentation around the potential ferry impact, I was pretty skeptical just about how the numbers came about in terms of, suggesting that the campground was going to actually result in an overall reduction in potential impact to the ferry in comparison with the build out of single family units. And I tried to get my mind around how that number came out, and 72% reduction or 78% reduction compared to a build out of 24 single family homes. Just I couldn't do the math. So I am curious about thresholds and numbers, just as Jeremy commented. Personally, I say this at the risk of my wife overhearing, I think the park is a good idea. I think it's a good land use, to kind of get at some of Sue Ellen's comments, are we interested? Is this a good idea in comparison with the alternative? I do think it's a good land use, but I am concerned about the scale. Today on Adams Road, coming back from Grafton Lake in the afternoon, the traffic was moving at less than 20 kilometers an hour. And it's like the road's already, at capacity. The ferry obviously was at capacity coming back, and this is off peak in terms of season. So those are some comments and maybe an additional kind of nudge at the question around minimum thresholds.
Yeah, thank you for those, Phil. a few good questions in there. In terms of the threshold piece, I don't know if I can give you much more than what I've said, but I'll try it. I'll do my best. As I said, there's not a threshold for a specific getting a specific number of people to the park or kilometers of trails, or we don't plan parks in that way. As I said, with the overnight use, it was an important driver of the purchase, for sure it was. The rezoning application seeks to approve up to 100. That's before Bowen Island Municipality now. We're also in the planning process to figure out, as I said, the exact right fit and mix and phasing and all of that of the campsites on the land. So you know, I don't know what else I can say beyond that. You know, I think the land use process is to determine that indeed, can we do this? The planning process is to determine exactly what the right fit is. But is the magic number 95, or you know, I just, you know, I don't have a magic number like that. But it certainly is an important part, and those are the two processes at play right now. In terms of the access and the ferry pressure, yeah, I mean, we've heard that loud and clear. It is the community's concern. It is our concern as well. The goal of our planning work in the park is absolutely not to overwhelm the systems that sustain the island, including the ferry. In the initial study that was done, there's two things they're looking at trips to the site, and then there's also the ferry impacts. And I think their work on calculating trips to the site, i.e. drivers on the road, is probably a little bit more advanced than the ferry calculations. Additional work on that is coming. In terms of how, I'll just throw some ideas on you in terms of level of traffic. Daniel went through what the site can be used for, which is extensive. There's the construction of what could be done there, and then there's the use of it. So that's something to consider. The proposed approach for the park is really to get people there not in their cars. So it's for Metro Vancouver to run a shuttle, a dedicated shuttle to the park, and would be to work with Bowen Island to improve trail connectivity to the park. Now there would be some local car access for accessibility. There would be up to 25 drive-in car access campsites, but even those, the turnaround is over 3 days, and they're not always booked at the same time. So it's not a matter of 100 people driving in their cars to 100 campsites. It's an entirely different model of accessing nature that we're proposing here. But certainly take your point on the concerns with the ferry. Though we share those concerns, and it's something that we're going to be looking really, really closely at.
EG, you're up.
Great, thank you. Appreciate, Jeffrey, the you sitting in the hot seat here at our committee meeting. I guess in terms of overall, I mean, I do want to say, first of all, I have long thought that CRC is a great candidate for a park, and overall, I am supportive of the park concept. I have huge concerns about numbers of visitors, including camping as well as day visitors. For example, right now, without a park being there in the summer, sometimes I can't get to the beach at CRC because it is completely overrun with mostly people from off island. So the people are going to come. And I think it's a bit naive, some of the numbers that you've put together, or the numbers that have come up in terms of visitor use. people are going to go to that park, and I think your visitor numbers are low. And so what I would really like to see is some specific examples, some targets as to, for example, the maximum number of vehicles, including day use and camping. So because we have to look at it as a whole, we can't sort of separate out, oh, it's just going to be so many campers. We need to have the whole picture. And a mechanism for managing that. We need to know that these are going to be managed to a maximum number. Because quite honestly, if you go into the Cove on the summer, I mean, the thing is we are overrun with people. Bowen Island, and these are all visitors, the existing visitors, and the proposal here is to have more visitors, and to think that we're not going to be, it's not going to be a very attractive place to go is, as I said, I think that's not the case. So I think that's sort of, it's already been brought up about the scale of the operations. And I know that you mentioned the adaptive management, and that sounds great, but fundamentally, where I wonder about this is because we feel, at least I feel, pressured because we're supposed to meet Metro Vancouver's timeline. If we were truly in an adaptive management position, we would be exploring these sort of concepts before Metro Vancouver asks the Bowen Island Council and Bowen Islanders to approve of something that we don't know enough about, because we haven't, there isn't the data, there isn't the information about, oh, we are going to limit, we've done the studies, these are so many people who are, we know that, Metro Vancouver is the third largest city in Canada, or the urban area in Canada. Therefore, there's going to be a lot of people who want to come to Bowen Island and who are going to go there, and they're going to get in their cars and they're going to drive there, unless there are specific targets and management. And we need to know that before this thing gets approved. In my view, it has to be specific, that level of specificity. You can't just say to us, we're going to adaptively manage it. The impacts will be just tremendous on our community if it's not done properly. So that's one sort of long-winded bit. The other thing which I haven't heard discussion of, and it just is referred to, I think, in past council minutes, as well as I thought in Daniel's report in terms of the financial aspects, and that is Pebble Beach and the walkway in between, what's it called, Skywalk, is that included in this whole package? And if so, how does that relate to the rest of the proposal with the 24 lots? So two issues. We need targets, specificity, and also how is the existing parkland, specifically Pebble Beach and the Skywalk, related to this proposed, to the park?
Thanks for those questions. I'll do my best to speak to those. And Daniel, do you want to speak?
Oh, I can follow you. That's
okay. Yeah, so yeah, no, those are great questions. And I guess a few comments on that. In terms of what we've got the ability to do is it is related to the park and our land holdings on Bowen Island. And to your point on people coming and they will come, yeah, I mean, I've spent lots of time on the island, done so much work there over the past 12 years. There are people coming to the island and being invited to the island and in accommodations that are nothing we can control. But what we can control is the capacity of the parkland that we manage. And there are specifics in the proposal in terms of the number of overnight sites, the number of parking spaces, how we propose to get people to the park, the investments we plan to make in the community to do that, and the tools we have to manage capacity. And some of those tools are what we actually plan and provide in the park. And those figures that we're providing are a built out number, a maximum. There isn't development beyond that. And those are all managed, and the tools we have to manage them are varied. So they're enforcement of our bylaw, they're closing the park as needed to vehicular access during times of high visitation or pressure on the community. There are day use reservation systems. There are certainly overnight use reservation systems. So we have tools to manage the use of the park. And those are the tools that we have at hand. Now, all of our park sites, including this one, are managed by uniformed staff, highly trained people, local folks who manage the park in a full-time way, with a broader team of park rangers and engineers and biologists and others to support land management. So one aspect of the project brings a level of capacity management to a landscape that isn't actively being managed, because you're quite right, it's used for camping and campfires and whatever else in the an interim park as it's slowly being eaten away for development. So that's the lens we would bring to it. In terms of the adjacent parkland, Daniel, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think just to say that, anybody looking at sort of minutes that have been released, it's obviously a conversation that the previous council had in terms of existing trails and municipal infrastructure, either in the park or adjacent to it. And I know it's a discussion that this council would probably have at some point as this process moves forward, and potentially, maybe next time we come to the committee if we've moved forward to discuss. But something to sort of how it works is there's sort of levels of municipal assets at the Cape. So currently in the 24 lots that are proposed to be a regional park, there are municipal right-of-ways that we have for municipal trails. So one level of discussion for our council is sort of, do we still maintain municipal trails through Metro's park? Or there's Cape Drive itself, so the municipal road then bisects the proposed municipal park. And so is that something that we want to still operate the road through the park, or discussions with Metro about closing the road as it goes through the park? And then there's sort of the interior trails at Cape Project Curtis that go through the interior lots that, or part of them go through the park and part then go through private land. And then there's sort of the coastal trail system and the road ends that we manage as parks. So that's something I think council still has to discuss and hasn't fully discussed and discussed with Metro, but sort of thinking of it as there's like different types of trails that we have or how they relate to the park.
So to be clear, Daniel, there has been no decision to include Pebble Beach, for example, in that coastal path in the overall management or turning it over to Metro.
Correct. Like that decision would have to be made, by council, and then we have those, as probably this committee knows. It's like we have those, So we have things like Pebble Beach. We have as road ends that were acquired through subdivision, and we have trails as municipal easements. So disposing of them would not be the same as disposing of parkland, but like any road closure would be a bylaw the council would have to consider and adopt, and likely it'd be sort of maybe a license agreement for an easement. Like even if it's just the trails that go through the proposed park now, and we're saying, okay, we're not going to manage those trails anymore, Metro will. They, as they go through the regional park, it'd probably be a license agreement where we license the right of way, but it's something again that council would have to decide at a meeting, and there'd be a report and a resolution and opportunity for comment before that decision happens. So I know I've heard sort of discussion that people say, well, we've already decided, and I say council hasn't even sort of debated that question or raised it, and it's almost I kind of view it's almost to some extent it's a secondary question. It's like, well, the first decision council's making is in terms of how are we proceeding with this application for the change in land use, the overnight camping. And then, as I say, it's sort of then, okay, well, logistically, how does that work with trails that already exist on what's proposed to be a regional park, and sort of how far out you go out from there.
Okay, thank you.
Sue Ellen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I just wanted to remind everybody that this is, as Daniel's just said, this is just about the change to allowing or permitting overnight camping use. And I've looked through the OCP that some of you are very close to, I know, and it includes a whole bunch of things. I'll send this around by email. We don't need to discuss it now. But right now, it's only like council is going to be presented with this for first reading. Later, there's a second reading. Then there's a third reading. And then there's a final reading of just about this use, this overnight camping use. And I think Metro Vancouver's board may be kind of waiting to hear about our municipal response to the overnight camping use, but there's more time to work out all these details it'll come back to this committee. And I wanted to just mention that's that timeline that Daniel showed earlier. This is just about first reading. My question for the group is, because I know there's a couple of trail runners in this group, and there's people who roam around various parts of Bowen Island. Do you see camping in Crown lands? And you don't have to we don't have to have a big discussion, because I know there's a long agenda. But I remember hearing one person tell me that early in the morning at the top of Mount Gardner, he saw 40 tents scattered around in the woods one day in the summer. And I'm just wondering if anybody has a comment, I would like to hear it, or you can email me later. But basically, we're early in the process, and this is a possibility, as Jeff mentioned, of managing some of these uses with staff on site. Thank you.
Jeremy.
Yeah, I should say, I suppose at the outset that in principle, I find that I would agree with DG that this is a really constructive use of a very beautiful property. The devil's in the details, inevitably. And I also want to thank Jeffrey for exposing himself to this this interrogation, as it were. But my main question actually was for Carla, and it was in regards to better clarifying the idea of the current usage of, for example, Pebble Beach and the trail to the lighthouse. Does the Muni have any stats on visitation currently there? I'm just thinking in terms of trying to get a handle on the fact that that's a fairly remote to the ferry and Snug Cove, and yet it clearly is, as others have said, is frequently visited by off-islanders.
The short answer is no, we don't have any stats. In my own experience, I've seen the parking full, right, from each road end all the way out to the road, and access has been blocked, especially for, any kind of emergency situation. There's been complaints, definitely. I wouldn't say that it's all off-islanders, though. I might disagree with DG on that one. I think it's a lot of locals, and I think it's just become a really popular beach with locals, and I'm sure tourists alike. But I see people there every day. So all week, all weekend, high season, low season. It's definitely not just tourists, but yeah, it's pretty packed out there on a regular basis. So.
I'd just like to add and agree with you, Carla. And it's not just Pebbly Beach; it's also even the waterfall trail, especially in the summer. I mean, the whole road is packed. Like I think they're all really well used. And I live within walking distance of the Cape, and it's every day. And that also reminds me about the plan for the shuttle. I think I saw that it would be a seasonal park shuttle, but I think that might also need to be reconsidered if this gets on to the next stage and next reading. I think that as long as it's a nice day, it could be in January, it could be February, there could be a need for like a shuttle throughout the year. I think only when it's snowing might be the time that a shuttle won't make it through, but it's a very popular area.
Yeah, if I may, that's an interesting comment, Lou. And what we've seen in all of our parks, especially the last 5 years, but is with climate change, shoulder season is expanding, and the favorable weather for accessing parks is growing. So yeah, the idea with the park shuttle is that it would be seasonal to start, but that it could be expanded, as needed, up to and including, full service over the year as needed. But no, good point. There might be a need for that beyond just the summer season. Take your point on that.
Nicola.
I don't want to take up too much airtime here because most things have already been said that I've thought of, but I just wanted to back up my fellow members here and also thank you, Jeffrey, for coming. And as everyone said, it's not an easy job. I don't envy you at all. But also really, a couple of points, just as people have already said, but the numbers I think are really what concerns me, as people have said, and I think it's really what concerns most of the community, because obviously we're pro parks, this committee, and people for the most part on Bowen, but I think it just scares people, the numbers. And even if you're talking about shuttling, 480 visitors, that's a lot of shuttles, that's a lot of bus traffic, that's and there's so many things I could say, but if you've ever gone on to Parks camp site trying to register, those sites are going to fill up. And having been to many campsites, the amount of stuff people take camping, there are very few people who are going to come by bicycle and have all their gear and all their food and everything they need. Really, most people bring a car, especially if you throw a couple of kids into that mix. Very few people can manage camping without a vehicle. Maybe you've got a different model that you can make that work for people, but I just really want to emphasize, as some of our members have already done, it's the numbers of people. And it sounds like, I think what I was hoping to hear was that there was flexibility with those numbers, but you do keep going back to the 100 sites as what is proposed. And I think that is really, at the end of the day, is what's scaring people. I'm one of the, I think maybe a few people on this committee who still has to commute, and the thought of it's bad enough in the summer and not only the summer now, and it makes me want to cry to think about having that many more people coming as a regular occurrence on the island. I just feel like it's really too much. So I really hope, I would love to see a park out there like so many, but I really hope there's some flexibility there in your numbers. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, and certainly I've heard loud and clear from yourself and several other members about concern with the numbers. I do just want to offer a bit of clarification on the type of camping that's proposed, and there is I think everyone, including myself, when you hear camping, you think of a BC Parks drive-in site, cleared area with a picnic table, a couple cars, a bunch of tents. It's a different kind of experience that is being proposed here, a low impact one, and one that most most of the access wouldn't be possible with a car. There wouldn't be a car permitted for people to bring with it. It would be a simple tent pad to pitch a tent, and there wouldn't be space or vehicle associated with that. So I think for a lot of folks who've got kids in a car, that is the kind of camping they're looking for. But what we're considering here is a lower impact model, and one that is maybe responsive to a region where people are living without a car and still need access to nature, need access to overnight time in nature, and would be open to doing it in a different way. So that's what's being considered here, a different model. But take your point on the level of sites and how many is being considered. And just to clarify, the rezoning application is for up to 100. The planning process is to determine the exact number, the exact type, where, how many exactly, and how it's laid out on the site. So it's not an exercise of, finding exactly 100. It's finding the right fit, and we're seeking approval for up to 100 through the rezoning process. But thank you for those comments.
Just with an eye on our schedule here, Sue Ellen or Daniel, maybe you could comment on sort of the desired timeline for a recommendation from this committee. I mean, I assume that
something.
Pardon me?
I think I have something.
Do you? Give it a shot. Let's hear it.
Okay. I'll put the, I'll do a share screen. Can you see?
Oh, there it comes.
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3, kind of 4, pulling off your notes, and then down about the traffic study, there's some messiness on what that recommendation would look like. But I think there was a pretty clear reduction of the number of campsites.
I think I heard most people were in favor of the idea of a park. Is that something that the group might want to put in there?
I would second that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Same here.
As long-
Okay, that the parks and
Maybe the first bullet. Yeah.
well, you want what about a whereas? Okay, Roger Curtis. Is that okay there, DG? Whereas PTGAC supports the idea of a park in Cape Roger Curtis.
Yeah, I guess it should say generally supports the idea of a park with the following.
Okay.
It should be with the following caveats or something.
Following caveats.
I don't know, is it
Okay.
caveats the right word? I don't know.
I can use that. And you know what? I am going to do some editing offline because it's quite a fairly stressful process to do this on camera. So if we can get that basic, don't laugh, Daniel. Okay, so we're going to get that whereas the PTGAC supports the idea of a park in Cape Roger Curtis. Oh, okay, with the following caveats. Okay, so support the idea of a park and then reduction of the number of campsites. Was that what?
I think it needs to be stronger to be considered. I think, at least considered seems a little bit wishy-washy to me. I think it's been pretty clear that the number proposed is too much.
That there be?
Yes, I would
That
be
in?
supportive of that.
And do we want to explain why here? That was mostly Jeremy's words.
If anything, I would say it's in relation to the scale of the park itself, physiologically or geographically. It is quite small in relation to the numbers that have been considered, in my opinion. Just seeing already how it's changed with just more or less local visitors and occasional off-islanders going to the coastal areas.
Jeremy, are you thinking, are you concerned with the quality of the visitor experience, or?
I think inevitably that is the case, but I'm also concerned with preserving it. Most people will migrate to the coastal areas. That's what's particularly unique about the park, and that's a very sensitive part of the park. I mean, potentially that could be mitigated, but again, that's part of the experience of people. I mean, you know, you can love a place to death, of course, and that tends to be what happens in beautiful places. But I don't know if anybody else agrees that with that idea that the scale of the park is physically rather small in relation to the expectations of use.
And Jeremy, are you referring to the scale of the proposed camping, or?
Potentially, but I always think of it as collectively, because
Number of visitors total?
yeah, for all the number of people that are camped there, and mind you, the impact of campers is going to be more protracted because they're longer. But when you add in day trippers and islanders and so on, it seems to me that's a lot of people.
Okay.
So how does that wording look in that first bullet?
Thank you, Sue Ellen.
I don't want to force this idea of its scale on anybody else. I'm not quite sure whether everybody's on board with that. Phil seemed to certainly allude that he was.
Yeah, I'm certainly in agreement with that thought, Jeremy, that I think it is the scale, and I agree with you that it's not just the number of campsites, it's the total package in terms of that ecological impact on the finite scale of the park, which is, you know, as you say, it's going to be focused around the coastal areas, which are the most attractive, but also potentially the most sensitive. So I think that needs to come out somehow in this comment.
May I make a suggestion that
Yes.
yes, please. A second bullet, the first one to be about the reduction in the number of campsites. And also with the campsites, I'm also thinking perhaps and maybe a revisiting of the number of car campsites versus non-vehicular campsites. And then a second bullet that relates to the cumulative number of visitors, campers plus day use anticipated, or the management of those are somehow to limit the total number relative, because there's a concern about so many visitors relative to the size of the park. So the second bullet is about the size of the park. Yeah. And so I think you need to so the reduction, yeah, I don't know, both of them would be reducing the number of both of those would be to mitigate traffic congestion, etc. So I'll leave it to somebody else if people feel that we should separate out those two bullets.
I think it's a good idea, DG, because I think they're related, but they're quite distinct concerns. I think one of them is related to, you know, things like traffic congestion. I almost think it's, you know, mitigating things like traffic congestion, but I think the scale question relates to internal ecological integrity of the park, which I think is a different concern altogether that needs to be called out separately. So I'd like to see those two things separated in this comment.
Sorry
You know,
about that.
I don't know
Yeah.
if anybody else is seeing this thing go all over the place.
Sorry, it's the screen share
incredible.
bar is blocking all my tools. I'm having to move it around a bit.
Well, I think the currently the bullet is it's combining mitigating traffic congestion with preservation of ecological integrity in the park. Whereas I think those are two separate things, I think.
Okay.
So I
Okay,
think
so we're gonna do
that what DG's done is to separate reduction of number of campsites and number of car campsites. That's going to help reduce traffic and ferry congestion. Cumulative number of
Pull that
campers
back
and
up.
day use visitors is going to have an impact on ecological integrity.
Mhm.
And Phil, I don't
Sorry,
think I don't think it's just the park, the proposed park. I think it's existing municipal trails and parks and adjacent crown land as well that would be impacted. Is that not? Or do we want to go that far?
Yeah, I
Well,
think you have to look at the whole picture, I mean, you can't realistically separate these things any more than you can separate visitors and congestion. I think that's a valid point to make. And I also, in addition, I wonder if we wanted to include the impression of denigration of the natural experience of the park as a result of the numbers. And maybe other people don't agree with that, but no.
just feel like if you're asking council for something, I guess, and we're just giving them reasons why that's something.
Maybe do we ask that mechanisms be put in place to
There we
limit
go.
the users or the use of the park so that we preserve the ecological integrity and we avoid traffic congestion?
Is that okay?
No, in order
No.
to preserve the ecological integrity of the park. Or
And this can go back up in the top here.
I think that is what Ben said.
What about a bullet list after in order to, and then have unique bullets for traffic congestion, ecological integrity, and any other points that we wish to add to that?
I think I heard her comment about impacts on other parks, trails, and beaches, municipal parks, trails, and beaches.
Yeah, can I put this back up at the top then? Here.
Looking good.
That last bullet, the last white bullet at the bottom there, isn't quite complete.
We need a verb.
I think you just want to put some limits on the cumulative number.
Okay, so
Just use limit instead of that. It should do the trick.
Yeah.
Limit
Limit the cumulative number of campers anticipated relative to the size of the park.
I think for the third bullet, what I did say revisit, but I think what I was really meaning was to reduce the number of car campsites.
so haven't we already sort of said this up here?
And maybe that those should be separated. Overall, we want to see a reduction in the number of campsites, and that we want to see more non-vehicular and less car. So maybe separate out those two bullets too.
Like there. Oh, and then
No.
here.
Yeah. And then the next one is another one. Separate. It should be a black bullet, I think.
Black bullet. Okay. Whew.
Okay.
I'm wondering, do people feel that it would be out of place to mention the scale of the park in relation to the quality of experiencing it? Because that the thrust of the argument is is to bring urban people in contact with nature. But if that's not if it is a less or diminished experience.
Okay, so that's going to preserve the quality of the experience.
Something to that effect.
Another word for preserve.
I mean, is that generally agreed upon, or do people have problems with that idea, including it?
I don't have a problem with that at all.
I'm just saying that kind of points to the mandate of the parks.
How about promote
Nature.
a high quality experience, or instead of, like sort of have it be a
Or ensure.
Or
ensure-
enhance
enhance the
the
quality?
quality.
Yeah, something like that.
Of the nature experience.
Or you could say the intent of the park even.
Can I just say, it's 8:30 and we've got other guests for our agenda.
That's a good point.
You're making great progress.
The intent of the project. Can we just maybe get the it'd be a reduction number of campsites. Okay, this one can go away.
No.
No, okay. Limit the cumulative number of.
I think you might be close to.
Yeah.
Okay, and then then I'm getting down to the adaptive management. I wanted to honor Lou's comment because it came up in the last meeting as well in the preliminary discussion about getting examples of incremental management approach to starting a regional campground. Do people agree with that?
I think it definitely is a good point, and I think I like the idea of hearing specific examples of how adaptive management approach would be applied in this case.
Okay, and
to manage to the implementation of the park. I don't know if that speaks to what Lou was trying to get at, but I think that is an important.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think having those specific examples that we can draw from in thinking about CRC. So I think the language looks good. Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward.
okay. And then these specific numbers, that was UDG, maybe we could pull that back up into this. Is it just part, I mean, it's in all of the planning documents, or did Jeff's response satisfy that question?
Yeah, I think where I was going with that one was, and maybe it could be included in, maybe what we want here is, rather than examples of adaptive management approach, we want specific targets in
Okay, here,
that adaptive management approach, for example.
Including specific targets.
Yeah.
Okay, great. The 4-season shuttle, That's not the first time that's come up at this table. Or just table similar to this.
Mm.
It was only said by one person. Does anyone have any thoughts?
I
about
back it. I think it's a
Yep.
great idea. Yep.
Yep. There's the shuttle, and then what about support for rather than just they'd said for the multi-use path, they said exploring partnerships, again, concrete, this sort of the
Okay.
shuttle and support for the multi-use path to get there, right?
Hmm. And other such
Alternative transportation
Yeah.
options, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was going to say collaboration. Okay, there we go. Transportation. Okay.
Great.
And then there was a lot about the traffic study. So I'm not sure what that would be as far as a request. So there was talk about not trusting that number, with the believability of the visitors being more or less than the homes. Something about disentangling certain terms and more about the believability of the numbers. So I'm not sure how to put that into a recommendation if anyone has any words on that.
Could it be something like ask for a second opinion on the traffic
Okay.
study?
Just another one.
Or more detail, or I don't know.
I think it's more detail that you know enlightens us as to how the traffic study numbers have come about, because I guess I'm
The methods.
the methods and yeah, we need more detail regarding the methods behind the
Methods
traffic
and
The
study.
method.
Behind.
Methodology?
The methodology of the transportation study. Yeah. Or whatever that's called.
That-
I think methodology.
And that's ground truthed, right?
Oh,
It needs to be.
Yeah, it needs to be, and the supporting data, I guess the data that supports the conclusions.
Yeah.
it and its data. Okay. So that got rid of all that. Oh. And then if there's anything I missed, this is just a few things that I like. This has been an interesting process because with Jeff here, it goes from sort of this is my comment to a Q&A. So I'm just trying to sort of pull from what I've heard. Is there any?
That's really good stuff.
It was
For
I
a
would
quick,
say it's really good, but
well, no, for a quick
intentions were pure.
put together. I think it probably still needs a little bit of work, but it's a
Yeah.
really good summary.
Could I suggest that before we've that we are able to send this around by email
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
finish it up at that time? I know we've done that in other
Yes.
instances.
Can I just get you guys to vote on it now as like in principle, and then we can do an edit to go around, so I don't have to, just for me, it's long weekend and then it goes to council.
Yeah.
So I don't have to be waiting and counting emails.
Mm.
Okay. Do I need to get a mover, Steph?
Yes, please.
Yes. Anyone move to endorse this recommendation in principle?
And Steph, maybe
I
if you
just-
could make it so people can see it.
Oh, sorry. EJ doesn't want to vote on this.
Well, no, I'm just wondering what happens
It just
if
has to be at
there's-
council on Tuesday, so.
if there's other things that we've realized that should be in there that's not in there.
Second reading,
You'd have to wait till the
or
next meeting.
if you can get it around by email, sort of like by, end of day tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I don't even know if I can get this to you by end of day tomorrow. There's more like you and water committees in the day tomorrow. So
And
like,
another committee tomorrow night.
do
I don't know. I just, it just feels like it's important to get it
you're
right.
not ready. Okay, well, why don't we?
But maybe
let's
I'm
go
in the
for a-
minority here. If other people feel like we're ready.
It's not, I don't think it's ready, so we can go around and edits can come back, but if someone has a great idea at 4 o'clock on Thursday, it may not, we may
Is
not
there
make it
such a
to
thing
council,
as
it may have gone to council.
provisional?
already. Pardon?
Is there such a thing as provisional approval that we could give now?
Yeah, I said in principle.
Yeah.
I mean, the committee can also say, like, you could say at the start, initial comments or something, and then the committee can provide more comments as it moves forward. Like, I know, you know, at the very least, we would anticipate further referrals from council to this committee. So this isn't
We have initial
the only
comments already.
opportunity. Sorry, for further comments. Or,
For secondary.
yeah. All right.
More comments following.
Additional comments?
And I'm also aware that our chair is not here as well. And I'm sure she has some comments.
Okay, you know what? I think that's fine. I will fit it in. I will make it happen. We'll do a vote by email. I guess I'm just gonna ask you guys, please check your email. Please don't make me phone you all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks,
Okay,
Steph.
thank you,
Thank you.
Steph. And now we've
Yeah.
got more guests. So over to you, Ben.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you letting me join your meeting and the great discussion and feedback. I'm sure we'll see you again, and I'll let you get on with the rest of the meeting. But thank you all so much. Good to meet you all.
Great. Thanks, Jeff.
Bye now.
So we are very quickly moving on to second council referral, the rezoning application for 8 Arbutus Bay Road, and we'll hear from Daniel again.
Thank you, Ben. So I'm just gonna put up just a quick overview of this application. So I think all of you were present when we did I don't know if you were all able to attend the site visit in January, but and the Parks Trails has considered this at a couple meetings, but just a reminder, this is a rezoning application, 8 Arbutus Bay Road on the south coast of Bowen Island, sort of south of the golf course. The parcel 7.2 hectares in size, so what is that, almost 20 acres. And the application is to rezone to permit 7 residential lots, 2.89 hectare park and small common property. And so when the Parks and Trails considered this before, you provided comment to council that you supported the rezoning application with conditions. So the proposed park be expanded to include public access to Echo Beach, the coastal bluff and sensitive shoreline ecosystem be protected through a conservation covenant, that an updated project-specific environmental assessment be conducted, that the goal of protecting at least 50% of the land from development is met, and that consideration is given to holding the proposed park as a municipal park rather than lands held by a conservancy. So council considered your referral or your recommendation and that of other committees at the February 27th meeting and gave first reading to the amendment bylaw. Referred the bylaw to the Islands Trust, to back to this committee and some other committees, and required an updated environmental assessment prior to second reading and required the applicant to update the neighbors. So just in terms of where we are in the process, so we introduced the application to council in November, did committees December and January. Council gave first reading in February, and we're back doing a second round of referrals through March and April, and then we would proceed to second reading, hold a public hearing, third reading, and final decision. So I just had flagged in the staff report just a couple steps of what council did essentially in response to your recommendation. So one of the steps that the bylaw did was expand the park size around Echo Bay. So you see on the left what was in the application that came before you in December and January, and then on the right side being the additional park area that's included in the amendment bylaw. So trying to capture sort of that bank around Echo Bay above the beach area. Shoreline covenant, so the council supported the inclusion of a protective covenant of land within 30 meters of the sea. And so the applicant is working on mapping that area to be included in the covenant. That would be a condition of the rezoning. The 3 being the goal, 50% of the land protected. So staff and the applicant were confident that the combination of the park dedication, a shoreline covenant, and a conservation covenant on the pasture land at the northern part of the site will exceed 50% of the total site, so meeting that goal in the conservation development policy. The park dedication to Conservancy, so council referred this application to the Bowen Island Conservancy and the Islands Trust Conservancy for discussion of possible dedication. I don't have an update on those discussions at this point, so both have been referred and we haven't had a chance to have a response from those groups, but would welcome further comment from this committee on that proposal. Council did require an updated environmental assessment as a condition of consideration of second reading. That assessment is underway, but not completed and submitted to the municipality at this time. So that was the end of my update. I'll stop there for any discussion.
Great, thank you, Daniel. And maybe we'll turn it over. We did have some Emiko. Would you like to make some comments?
Sure, I appreciate that. So I just wanted to give you a few updates. We did do a site walk with the Bowen Island Conservancy on Sunday, April 2nd, and we're looking to hear back from them fairly soon. As part of getting an updated environmental assessment, it's been identified that the ditch below the horse field, which is pretty much at the top 2/3 of the property, or top third of the property, that there's a channelized stream there. And this has an impact on the location of the communal septic, as well as future structures for lot 3 and lot 4. So the other issue we are dealing with is that there's the public road, Lindy's Road, was not built in the proper location when the Fairweather development was done over 40 years ago. And we're trying to sort that out with the Fairweather strata. But as a result, it looks like there's going to be some additional unanticipated costs to us in trying to rectify the lack of public road, I guess. The next point I'd like to make is that the Housing Advisory Committee continues to support 2 additional smaller lots in the Horsefield, as this offers diverse clustered housing options. And we plan to go back to council to ask that this be considered. And the benefits of this, and I'd like to just share my screen if I can. The benefits of this is I'm sharing, I think.
We can see it.
Okay. The benefits of the 2 additional smaller lots is that the road that was originally planned, I don't know if you can see my cursor, which was planned to go around lot 3, can now go down the middle and separating lot 3 and the 2 smaller lots that are proposed, with the communal septic being kind of on the side here. And then we're sort of proposing a garden for the common for the strata owners to use between the septic and the channelized stream. So the channelized stream is just along this road here in the middle, which bifurcates our property. So the benefit of this is you don't have, we shorten the road significantly, which is nice. And ultimately having the 2 additional smaller lots is going to make our project financially viable. Yeah, we got some updated costs for building the road, putting the water in, and I guess with the escalation of all the costs and everything, it seems to come into at least 2 times what we had anticipated. So it's making our project prohibitively expensive at this point. So that's sort of the main thing I wanted to comment on, and we're raising this now because we want to get a sense whether the 2 additional smaller lots, whether this committee is going to have any issues when we go to council for the next reading. The last point I want to make is the park, the beach area by the park. What we did was, if you compare to what Daniel just showed, we actually expanded this area, the west side of it, so that you get this very nice bluff viewpoint. But we had to make this area a little smaller because it was encroaching on our septic field area. So that's sort of one of the challenges we have of the one change that was made by council. So I think those are my comments. Unless Hamish, you had anything else you wanted to add, we're happy to answer any other questions.
No, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, I think that change to the park area around the beach, it's addressing what was wanted still in terms of access. And actually, I think expanding it a bit further west is better. I think those of you that did the walk with us before will remember we walked out on that bluff, and that was the bench for a bench was the comment about it. It's a good spot to get a great view from there. So I think it better serves the purpose anyway.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments? Sue Ellen.
Thanks. Just a quick one to make sure I understand. So this would be the horsefield pasture goes away and becomes 2 small lots with the garden and room for septic and that kind of thing. Is that what I'm understanding?
Not really. We'd still have the horsefield pasture. So that one lot where, are you sharing again?
Yeah.
The cursor is still a significantly larger lot.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's still there. It's
So-
just, it's moved over a bit, and then the road is in the middle.
Yeah.
As opposed to the road being on this side.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. That's clear.
EG, go ahead.
Again, yes, thanks very much for the update. Just curious, so I understand, so the housing committee recommended about the 2 smaller lots, and was that have anything to do with affordable housing, or is these are
No.
sort of market? Yeah, maybe you could just give me a little bit. Sorry, it's getting late, but
That's okay. So the background to that is more that they just thought it makes sense to have more housing available, and so we still have to address the affordable housing issue, and that's going to be done through a contribution. So we're also working on the formula for the contribution with Daniel and the Housing Advisory Committee. But obviously having the 2 extra lots will give both a higher calculation of what that contribution will be, and also allow for a bit more funds for us to make that contribution, because it goes into, unfortunately on our side, just the cost side of the ledger. So we want to make sure we have enough to make those contributions as well.
So as I understand it, they had 2 mandates. One is diverse housing options. So smaller lots that can serve at a lower price point. And then they also have the affordable housing objective.
Yeah.
So they're 2 separate issues.
So this would be addressing the former of those.
great, thank you.
Daniel, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, just to provide context. So yeah, the Housing Advisory Committee, when we did the first round, that was one of their recommendations, was 2 additional lots in the north of the property, trying to meet that mandate for diverse housing options. And so in my staff report that went to council at the end of February, contained an alternative for council to endorse, an alternate bylaw that permitted 2 additional lots. At that meeting, council didn't raise that alternative, didn't discuss it. And so when I came back to the Housing Advisory Committee last week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago, they again recommended that council consider it again and would like to see it still part of the bylaw. So when I come back to council, that will be, again, sort of an alternative for council to consider that the Housing Advisory Committee recommends and the applicant obviously supports. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Just one question from me. I saw as one of the recommendations made by this committee, there was that the parkland sort of be considered as a municipal park, but it looks like the avenue you're going or looking to go through is through a conservancy. What's the reason for that?
Yeah, so that was like that again is sort of the applicant's desire to see it transferred to a conservancy, and council at the meeting referred it to those two conservancy groups to anticipate sort of their willingness to do it. And if those groups, I think that's what, again, I would report back to council, if they're interested in having the park transferred to them, then it would be sort of discussion for council and decision for council. So I don't think council's decided. I think council viewed it as, well, we're open enough to the idea to refer it to the groups to see if they are interested, but haven't made that decision. And I think, would as well look for this committee's comments.
Okay.
From our perspective, there are financial advantages to going through the conservancy because you get a tax benefit through the contribution that you don't get if it's a contribution to the municipality.
Okay, and that would have no impact on public access to the park?
Right. I mean, the conservancy may have their views as to how the land should be treated, so it's obviously would be subject to that, as would the municipality. But that isn't our objective one way or another to affect public access. And certainly there's also a right of way or a pedestrian access down the road that we built to the beach as well. So that area for sure would be accessible to the public.
Okay, great. Carla.
Thanks so much. That was my question as well. When we did the parks plan 5 years ago now, we heard that a lot from elderly people and from people with mobility issues, that they were looking for places where they could sit and enjoy a view of the ocean, because a lot of our beaches aren't actually very accessible. So my question was whether or not that road could have some vehicular access, so that maybe we could put a parking spot, just for like one handicap parking spot closer to the beach, so that people could access that in the future with a vehicle that needed to.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges we face is we have neighbors on the other side, and they're very concerned about people driving down and then driving through, because the roads are all connected between where we come down here and into their lot. So we want to be cautious about that issue. There is planned, at least on this drawing here, a turnaround area. Can you show where that is? Aim on the, oh, we're not sharing anymore. Hang on a sec. So there's a turnaround area down at the here. So there's probably room that we could put a sort of street side slot there for parking for a handicap. I think we could accommodate that, but we haven't looked at that in detail yet.
Okay. I would just add that I just think it's really important. We've had experiences in the past where this was like, the purpose was to provide access for people with mobility issues, and then it only ends up being pedestrian access that, people with mobility issues can't access anymore. So I just, I'd really like to make sure that I really love the idea of providing that bench, and that area was really nice, the bench on the bench.
Yeah.
So I'd love to make sure that that was easily accessed by those it was intended for. That's all. Thank you.
Sue Ellen.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just trying to remember, and I'm afraid it is getting late. I guess this is a question for Daniel. Daniel, is the idea of public access through the park, or what's labeled park here, if it becomes the property of a conservancy, would the public access still remain?
I think there's a couple different ways to go about that. Like, one would be that, like, if the council and municipality says, okay, yes, we think that this is an appropriate decision to transfer to a conservancy, the potential is there for the municipality to actually take a statutory right of way over a portion of it. So we say, okay, the conservancy will manage the land, and that seems like an appropriate decision, but the municipality feels it's important to still have maybe a trail route over a portion of the site. Well, we could actually take it as a statutory right of way and have a municipal trail in land that's otherwise managed by the conservancy.
Great, thank you. I'm just thinking about what this committee might like to recommend at this point, and looking at what's at the top of the agenda there, that the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee recommend to council the following points. Maybe that would be one of the points that I'll stop.
Sorry, one of the points being that the conservancy take it and there be a right of way?
Just that public pedestrian access through what's currently called park be maintained, something like that, or be put in place.
I like that. Does anyone else have any sort of questions or comments before we move forward, ideally with a recommendation here? Steph, are you working on something right now? It sure looks like it.
Just that one line. I haven't,
Yeah.
Haven't heard a lot of comments, mostly questions. Well, and Carla's handicapped spot, then Hamish, is it Brian or Hamish today?
Hamish.
Brian's in black screen, sorry. Replied about the neighbors. I'm not sure where that landed as feasible or something the committee would like to recommend. I did make a note to Carla that we're doing, and Sue Ellen are doing the accessibility committee and making an accessibility plan, and there's a lot of feedback about beach access from the community surveys.
Do members of the committee support sort of council going ahead with this, provided there be public access to park and beach? Yeah, generally. Anyone feel strongly against it? No? Okay. Steph, do we just want to write a recommendation that says something like the Parks, Trails and Greenway Committee recommends that council moves forward with this, with the understanding that public will have access to park space and the beach access at Echo Bay?
I think that might be a motion. Looks like Steph is getting it up
I know
there.
that public pedestrian access to the park and beach.
Well, and I would endorse an inclusion of what Carla mentioned as well. I think it's really important.
Along with handicap.
How about like vehicular access for people with mobility issues, or I mean, what do you think, Carla?
Can we put accessibility, like the accessibility first? Because I see this happening with the Cape Roger Curtis thing too. Suddenly it becomes car accessible, and just want to make sure. I mean, cars can go everywhere, and we have lots of them. So maybe if the handicapped accessible could be the first few words, something like that. Or disability, something. I'm not going to do the wording for the committee. Sorry.
Yeah. How about just access for people with mobility challenges be ensured?
That sounds good.
Sorry. And that access, sorry, say that again, Ben?
Oh, you have it. Just if you take out vehicular, you've got it. Great.
Does the
Whatever.
committee support the idea of the bench on the bench? I mean, I've heard a few people mention it, but I don't know that I've seen it written down. Is it written down, Daniel? It's not formal yet, is it?
No, so I think, yeah, it'd be something like the support the viewpoint above Echo Beach or above Echo Bay.
Mhm.
That looks good to me.
Look at public be provided. Access to,
It was,
The shoreline.
no, it was the
Oh.
lookout. Can you say it again, Daniel?
viewpoint.
Yeah, viewpoint above Echo Bay or on the north side of Echo Bay.
Okay.
Can I make one more suggestion? I'm sorry to, we've got public pedestrian access to the park. Can we also say, and a trail through the park and to the beach?
To,
Or a
I say,
trail
what if
right
it's
away?
to and through? Does that work?
Yeah, because it's early days and it might be a right away or it might, whatever, I don't know exactly where it'll go.
Does that work then? Just setting that to and through?
That one looks great. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone would like to move that we make this recommendation? I can't see hands. Sorry. I see Phil's hand. All right. A seconder. Jeremy. Any comments, questions, or disagreements about this? All in favor? I think we're good. Great. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Hamish and Emiko.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
coming.
We'll sign off now. Thank
Yeah,
you.
sorry for the lateness.
Yeah.
You two are learning a lot about the Cape Roger Curtis Park proposal.
We're always after them.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, it's getting kind of late, but is everyone on board for speaking a little further? We have a couple things left on the agenda here. Yeah, I'm going to pass it over to Carla then. We're on 6.1 Tunstall Bay shoreline restoration.
I am more than happy to defer both of those items until the next meeting if everybody's
I'm more than happy to hear that.
okay.
Okay,
All right.
Let's do that.
very good.
And then we move down to updates. We don't have anyone from BITS, I don't think. Sue Ellen, would you like to do a council update?
I think you've just heard some of the big things that are going on. I don't want to take too much time. I'll just say Islands Trust I'm on Trust Council, Trust Program Programs Committee, and anyway, good things are happening there in terms of a secretariat function, which means funding and support for meetings and things for Howe Sound Community Forum and the Ocean Watch working group that I'm on through the Howe Sound Biosphere now. So we're kind of linked in a little bit with the marine side and with the other islands and communities around Howe Sound. And I've got tons I could say about it, but I'm not going to do that now. And I will say also that council has passed, and our latest kind of plan about what we're going to work on this term. And but it hasn't quite come out yet. So if you're subscribed to the newsletter, you'll see it, or whatever. Keep an eye on the paper, that kind of thing. But just to let you know, council's figuring out how we're going to work together for the term coming up. And it's already been very busy. So thanks everybody for bearing with us. That's enough of an update for me, I think.
Great. Thanks, Sue Ellen. Anyone have any questions for Sue Ellen? No. Okay. Moving on. Carla, would you like to give a staff update?
Sure, it's gonna be really quick. We did some planters for the dock and for the multi-use pathway that just got put out today. So have a look at them. They'll look a lot better once they fill out a little more. We did yellow flag iris treatments in along Grafton Lake around that trail there. So you can watch out for those and make sure you tell your friends that they're not garbage and not to pick them up, because there's like big black rubber matting everywhere. And what was the last thing? Oh, I wanted to tell you something else. Oh, just that the disc golf course got upgraded over like last weekend. So all the volunteers from the disc golf club added some concrete pavers to the tee boxes to keep them flat. They were getting really bumpy, and it was a really nice improvement. That's it.
Great. Thanks so much, Carla.
No worries.
Any questions for Carla? Okay, moving on. We have no new business, I don't think.
No, just a placeholder.
Okay, next meeting. Should we do that now?
No.
No,
Let's just have it.
we'll just let Steph organize that part.
Okay.
And thanks everybody for all your hard work tonight. That's a lot of material to wrap your minds around.
Okay,
Thanks.
I think we're good.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Stop in.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody.
Thank you, Steph.
you.